The vision came during the most ordinary moments, scrolling through social media on my phone, seeing post after post from Christian leaders, churches, and believers. But what Jesus showed me about the final warning sign will shake you to your core, because it's not happening in the world around us. It's happening inside the church, and it's happening right now. And what makes this vision so urgent is that this final sign means we have less time than anyone realizes. But before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps give me the strength to speak my truth. Now, let's get into my story. I was sitting in my living room on a Tuesday afternoon, taking a break between filming sessions for The Chosen. My phone was filled with the usual content pastors announcing their latest sermon series, worship leaders promoting their new albums, Christian influencers sharing inspirational quotes, churches advertising their upcoming events. Everything looked normal. Everything looked healthy. The church appeared to be thriving, growing numbers, impressive buildings, sophisticated programs, and constant activity. By every visible metric, Christianity in America seemed vibrant and alive. But as I scrolled through post after post, something began to happen that I can only describe as a tearing of the veil. My phone didn't disappear, the posts didn't change, but suddenly I was seeing two realities at once, what appeared on the surface and what existed beneath it. Jesus' voice came, not audibly, but directly into my consciousness. Jonathan, what you're about to see is the final warning sign before my return. It's not a sign in the heavens or on the earth. It's a sign in my church, and it's happening right now, in this moment, as you watch. My hands began to tremble as the vision intensified. I was still looking at my phone, still seeing the same posts from Christian leaders and churches, but now I could see something else, something that made my blood run cold. Behind every post, beneath every announcement, underneath every program and event, I could see a spiritual reality that was the opposite of what appeared on the surface. Churches that looked alive were spiritually dead. Leaders who appeared anointed were operating in their own strength. Believers who seemed passionate were going through religious motions without any genuine encounter with God. The final warning sign, Jesus said, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to press down on my chest, is not the rise of the Antichrist or the mark of the beast, or wars and rumors of wars. The final warning sign is the church becoming indistinguishable from the world while maintaining all the external forms of Christianity. I watched as this reality unfolded before me. A megachurch announced a new building campaign with a promotional video that looked exactly like a corporate marketing presentation, slick production, emotional manipulation, celebrity endorsements. There was nothing that distinguished it from a secular business venture, except the Christian vocabulary sprinkled throughout. A worship leader posted about their new album, and I could see beneath the surface that their motivation was identical to any secular artist building their brand, growing their platform, achieving success. The only difference was they were using Jesus' name to do it. A pastor shared a sermon clip that had gone viral, and I could see that his satisfaction came not from people encountering God, but from the validation of high view counts and positive comments. He was measuring success by the same metrics as any social media influencer. This is the final warning sign. Jesus explained, when the church adopts the world's methods, pursues the world's goals, measures success by the world's standards, and operates by the world's methods, values all while using my name and maintaining religious vocabulary, the end is near. The vision expanded, and I began to see this pattern repeated across every aspect of church life. Christian conferences that were indistinguishable from business conventions except for the worship music, church services that followed the same entertainment model as secular concerts, ministry strategies that were identical to corporate marketing plans. But it looked so successful, I heard myself say, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking aloud or just thinking. That's exactly the point, Jesus replied. The final warning sign is not obvious failure, it's apparent success that is built on worldly foundations rather than on me. The church looks more successful than ever by human standards, but it has never been further from what I intended it to be. I watched as a prominent Christian influencer posted about their latest book deal, their speaking tour, their growing platform. The post was filled with Christian language, thanking God for the opportunity, asking for prayer, claiming it was all for His glory. But beneath the surface, I could see that their motivations were identical to any secular celebrity, building their brand, expanding their influence, achieving recognition, The final warning sign, Jesus continued, is when the church can no longer tell the difference between building my kingdom and building their own kingdoms using my name. When pastors become CEOs, when worship leaders become performers, when churches become businesses, when ministry becomes a career and no one even notices the transformation because it happens so gradually. The vision shifted and I began to see how this had happened. It wasn't a sudden apostasy or dramatic rebellion. It was a slow, subtle drift that occurred over decades. Each compromise seemed reasonable at the time. Each adoption of worldly methods was justified as being necessary to reach people. Each shift toward entertainment and marketing was explained as contextualizing the gospel for modern culture. A church decided to make their services more seeker-friendly, which meant removing anything that might make visitors uncomfortable, including the presence of God that brings conviction. A ministry adopted corporate leadership structures, which meant replacing spiritual discernment with business metrics. A worship team focused on production quality, which meant prioritizing performance over genuine encounter with God. Each change seemed small, each compromise appeared justified, but together, they transformed the church into something that looked like Christianity but lacked its power, maintained its form but denied its reality. Watch what's happening right now, Jesus said, and the vision focused on current events unfolding in real time. I saw churches across America making decisions in this very moment that revealed how completely they had adopted worldly thinking. A megachurch was in a board meeting discussing how to increase attendance, and every strategy they proposed was taken directly from business growth models. Nothing about prayer, nothing about the Holy Spirit, nothing that distinguished their approach from a secular organization trying to grow market share. A worship team was rehearsing for Sunday's service, and their entire focus was on creating an emotional experience through lighting, sound, and performance. There was no prayer for God's presence, no seeking of the Spirit's leading, no distinction between what they were doing and what any secular concert production team would do. A pastor was preparing his sermon, but instead of seeking God's word for his congregation, he was analyzing trending topics on social media to find something that would get engagement. His goal wasn't transformation, it was relevance. His measure of success wasn't changed lives, it was viral reach. This is happening right now, Jesus emphasized, in this moment, across thousands of churches. The final warning sign is not coming, it's here. The church has become so worldly that it can no longer recognize its own worldliness. It has adopted the world's methods so completely that it thinks this is what Christianity is supposed to look like. I watched as Christian leaders made decisions based entirely on worldly wisdom. A denominational board discussed how to stay relevant to younger generations, and every solution they proposed involved compromising biblical truth to align with cultural values. A church staff meeting focused on how to compete with other churches for members, using language and strategies identical to businesses competing for customers. But they're using your name, I protested. They're talking about you, singing about you, claiming to serve you. That's what makes this the final warning sign, Jesus replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. They use my name while pursuing their own agendas. They talk about me while building their own kingdoms. They claim to serve me while operating by the world's values. And they've done it for so long that they can no longer see the difference between my way and the world's way. The vision intensified, and I began to see the specific ways this final warning sign was manifesting right now, in this moment. Churches were making decisions about worship styles based on what would attract crowds rather than what would honor God. Pastors were crafting messages designed to avoid offense rather than to speak truth. Ministries were measuring success by numbers and dollars rather than by transformation and obedience. Christian leaders were building platforms and brands rather than making disciples. And the most terrifying aspect was that no one seemed to notice. The church had become so accustomed to operating by worldly methods that it had forgotten what genuine Christianity looked like. Leaders who pointed out the problem were dismissed as being too negative or not understanding modern ministry. Believers who longed for something more authentic were told they were being unrealistic or living in the past. The final warning sign, Jesus said, is when the church becomes so worldly that it persecutes those who call it back to genuine faith. When leaders who pursue worldly success are celebrated, while prophets who speak uncomfortable truth are silenced. When churches that look successful by human standards are praised, while communities that pursue genuine transformation are dismissed as too small or too radical. I watched as this played out in real time. A pastor who had built a megachurch through entertainment and marketing was being celebrated across Christian media, invited to speak at conferences, held up as a model of successful ministry. Meanwhile, a pastor who had built a small community focused on genuine discipleship and transformation was being criticized for not growing faster, not being more relevant, not adopting proven growth strategies. "This is the final warning sign," Jesus explained. "When the church celebrates what I would reject and rejects what I would celebrate. When it honors those who build impressive religious organizations while dismissing those who make genuine disciples. When it measures success by the world's standards while claiming to serve me." The vision showed me churches across America in this very moment, and I could see that the final warning sign was not isolated to a few places, it was everywhere. From the largest megachurches to the smallest congregations, from the most conservative denominations to the most progressive movements, the church had adopted worldly methods, pursued worldly goals, and measured success by worldly standards. And the most shocking aspect was that this was happening right now, in real time, as I watched. This wasn't a warning about what might happen in the future, it was a revelation of what was already happening in the present. "How much time is left?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The final warning sign means the end is near," Jesus replied. "When the church becomes indistinguishable from the world except for its religious vocabulary, when it operates by the world's methods while claiming my authority, when it pursues the world's goals while using my name, the time of grace is running out." As the vision began to fade and I found myself fully back in my living room, still holding my phone with its endless stream of posts from churches and Christian leaders, Jesus spoke one final time. "Tomorrow night, I will show you the specific ways this final warning sign is manifesting right now in the church and why most believers don't even recognize what's happening. What you will see will expose how deeply the worldliness has penetrated and how little time remains before my return." I set down my phone, but I couldn't stop trembling. The final warning sign wasn't some dramatic event in the future, it was the current reality of the church. And it was happening right now, in this moment, as churches made decisions, as leaders built platforms, as believers pursued success using Jesus' name while operating by the world's values. The question that haunted me was both urgent and terrifying. If the final warning sign is the church becoming worldly while maintaining religious forms, and if that's happening right now across thousands of churches, how much time is actually left? And more importantly, how many believers are so immersed in worldly Christianity that they can't even recognize the warning sign that's unfolding all around them? The second night brought revelations that exposed the specific ways the final warning sign was manifesting in the church right now. After witnessing the church becoming indistinguishable from the world while maintaining Christian vocabulary, I spent the entire day unable to look at Christian social media, unable to watch Christian television, unable to engage with church culture without seeing the worldliness that had become so normalized, no one even noticed it anymore. What Jesus would show me about how deeply the world had penetrated the church would prove that we were further gone than anyone realized. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the images from the previous vision, churches operating like businesses, leaders building brands like celebrities, ministries measuring success like corporations. The final warning sign wasn't coming, it was here, happening right now, and almost no one could see it. At exactly 1:11 a.m., I noticed the time because of its stark simplicity, my bedroom filled with that overwhelming presence. Jesus stood before me, his expression carrying a grief so profound it seemed to encompass the sorrow of watching his bride transform herself into something unrecognizable while thinking she was becoming more effective. "Tonight," he said, his voice resonating with both love and urgency, "I will show you the specific ways the church has become the world. These manifestations are happening right now, in this moment, across thousands of churches. And what makes this the final warning sign is that the church has become so worldly that it can no longer recognize its own worldliness." The room dissolved, and I found myself observing churches across America in real time. But Jesus was showing me something I had never seen before, the specific ways worldliness had replaced genuine Christianity while maintaining all the external forms of faith. The first way the church has become the world, Jesus said, is in how it measures success. The church now uses the exact same metrics as secular businesses, attendance numbers, budget size, building square footage, social media followers, and brand recognition. I watched as this played out in a church board meeting happening at that very moment. The board was reviewing the pastor's performance, and every metric they discussed was purely numerical. How many people attended? How much money came in? How many baptisms were recorded? How many social media followers did the church gain? Not once did anyone ask, how many people were genuinely transformed? How many believers were growing in Christ-likeness? How many were learning to hear God's voice? How many were being equipped for genuine ministry? "Observe this megachurch pastor," Jesus said, directing my attention to a leader I recognized. He was reviewing his church's annual report, and his face showed satisfaction as he looked at the growth numbers. Attendance was up 15%, giving was up 20%, social media engagement was up 35%. By every metric he was measuring, his ministry was successful. But as Jesus revealed what he saw, I witnessed something devastating. Yes, the numbers were impressive, but spiritual depth was declining. Genuine transformation was rare. Most attendees were consumers rather than disciples. The church had grown numerically while shrinking spiritually. The world measures success by numbers and growth, Jesus explained. When the church adopts these same metrics, it reveals that it has become the world. True success in my kingdom is measured by transformation, not by attendance, by depth, not by breadth, by disciples made, not by crowds attracted. The second manifestation was even more pervasive. The second way the church has become the world is in how it markets itself. Churches now use the exact same strategies as businesses: branding, advertising, demographic targeting, and consumer research. I watched as a church marketing team met to plan their Easter campaign. They discussed their target demographic, their brand identity, their competitive advantage over other churches in the area. They analyzed which messages would resonate with their desired audience, which promotional strategies would maximize attendance, which social media platforms would give them the best reach. The language they used was identical to any corporate marketing meeting. They talked about their product, their customer base, their market share. The only difference was they occasionally used Christian vocabulary, but the thinking, the methods, the goals were purely worldly. "Look at this church's website," Jesus said, showing me a site that could have been for any business. Professional photography, slick design, carefully crafted messaging designed to appeal to specific demographics. There was nothing that distinguished it from a corporate website except the cross in the logo. "The world markets products to consumers," Jesus explained. "When the church adopts these same strategies, it reveals that it has become the world. It has transformed the gospel into a product, believers into consumers, and the church into a business competing for market share." The third way the church had become the world was perhaps the most visible. The third way the church has become the world is in how it conducts worship. Churches now use the exact same entertainment model as secular concerts, professional production, emotional manipulation, and performance-focused presentation. I watched as a worship team prepared for their Sunday service. The discussion was entirely about production values, lighting cues, camera angles, sound levels, visual effects. They talked about creating an experience, about taking people on a journey, about building energy and creating moments. Not once did anyone mention the Holy Spirit. Not once did anyone pray for God's presence. Not once did anyone discuss how to create space for genuine encounter with God rather than manufactured emotional experience. "Observe this worship leader," Jesus said, showing me someone I recognized from Christian music. She was rehearsing for a large conference, and her entire focus was on her performance, hitting the right notes, making the right facial expressions, engaging the audience at the right moments. She was functioning exactly like any secular performer, except she was singing about me. "The world creates entertainment experiences for audiences," Jesus explained. When the church adopts this same model, it reveals that it has become the world. Worship has been transformed from genuine encounter with me into professional performance for consumers. The fourth manifestation exposed how deeply worldly thinking had penetrated church leadership. The fourth way the church has become the world is in how it develops leaders. Churches now use the exact same corporate leadership models as businesses: MBA principles, management techniques, and organizational strategies. I watched as a denominational leadership conference unfolded. The speakers were teaching church leaders how to cast vision, how to manage teams, how to scale organizations, how to maximize efficiency. Every principle they taught came from corporate leadership books. Every strategy they recommended was taken from business management models. "Look at this pastor," Jesus said, showing me a church leader attending the conference. He was taking notes furiously, excited about implementing these strategies in his church. He had shelves of business leadership books in his office, but rarely opened his Bible for anything other than sermon preparation. He spent more time studying corporate success stories than seeking my face. "The world develops leaders through management training and organizational strategy," Jesus explained. "When the church adopts these same methods, it reveals that it has become the world. Spiritual leadership has been replaced by corporate management, and dependence on the Holy Spirit has been replaced by human expertise." The fifth way the church had become the world was the most heartbreaking. The fifth way the church has become the world is in how it defines success for individuals. The church now promotes the exact same goals as the world: personal fulfillment, material prosperity, and self-actualization. I watched as a popular pastor preached a message that was being live-streamed to thousands. His sermon was about living your best life, achieving your dreams, and unlocking your potential. The message was filled with Christian vocabulary, but the content was identical to any secular self-help seminar. "God wants you to be successful," the pastor declared. "He wants you to prosper. He wants you to achieve your dreams. He wants you to live in abundance." The congregation responded enthusiastically, taking notes, nodding in agreement, clearly inspired by the message. But as Jesus revealed what he saw, I witnessed something that made my heart sink. This pastor was preaching a gospel that required no death to self, no taking up of the cross, no losing your life to find it. He was offering people a Jesus who existed to help them achieve their goals, rather than a Jesus who called them to surrender their goals for his purposes. "The world defines success as personal fulfillment and material prosperity," Jesus explained. "When the church adopts this same definition, it reveals that it has become the world. The gospel has been transformed from a call to die to self into a promise of self-fulfillment." As Jesus revealed these 5 ways the church had become the world, measuring success like businesses, marketing like corporations, conducting worship like entertainment, developing leaders like organizations, and defining success like the world, a devastating pattern emerged. The church had adopted worldly methods in every area while maintaining Christian vocabulary, creating a form of Christianity that was indistinguishable from the world except for its religious language. "But they're reaching so many people," I protested, thinking of the massive crowds, the impressive numbers, the apparent impact. "Are they?" Jesus replied, his voice carrying infinite sadness. "Or are they attracting consumers who want religious experiences without transformation? Are they making disciples or gathering crowds? Are they building my kingdom or their own kingdoms using my name?" I watched as Jesus revealed the fruit of worldly Christianity. Churches that were numerically large but spiritually shallow. Believers who were religiously active but personally unchanged. Leaders who were professionally successful but spiritually empty. Ministries that were impressively organized but lacking my presence. The final warning sign, Jesus explained, is not just that the church has adopted worldly methods, it's that the church has done so while believing it's being more effective for me. Leaders justify their worldliness as necessary for reaching people. Churches defend their entertainment model as contextualizing the gospel. Pastors explain their corporate methods as being good stewards of resources. But the truth, he continued, is that when the church becomes the world, it loses the only thing that made it valuable to the world, its distinctiveness. When the church operates by the world's methods, pursues the world's goals, and measures success by the world's standards, it has nothing to offer the world except a religious version of what the world already has. I watched as this reality played out across thousands of churches. They had become so much like the world that they had nothing unique to offer. Their worship was like secular concerts with Christian lyrics. Their leadership was like corporate management with prayer added. Their success was like business growth with religious vocabulary. Their message was like self-help with Bible verses attached. And the most terrifying aspect was that this was happening right now, in this moment, as I watched. Churches were making these worldly decisions, leaders were implementing these worldly strategies, believers were pursuing these worldly goals, all while thinking they were serving God effectively. How did this happen, I asked, my voice breaking. How did the church become so worldly without anyone noticing? It happened gradually, Jesus explained, through 1,000 small compromises, each one seeming reasonable at the time. A church decided to make worship more excellent, which meant adopting entertainment production values. A pastor decided to be more strategic, which meant implementing corporate management techniques. A ministry decided to be more effective, which meant measuring success by worldly metrics. Each compromise was justified as being necessary for reaching people, for being relevant, for being good stewards, he continued. But together, these compromises transformed the church from a distinct community that operated by my values into a religious organization that operated by the world's values while using my name. The vision shifted, and I began to see the consequences of the church becoming the world. Believers who had been raised in worldly Christianity had no concept of what genuine faith looked like. They thought church was supposed to be entertainment. They thought worship was supposed to be an emotional experience. They thought success was supposed to be measured by numbers. They thought the gospel was supposed to make their lives better. This is why the final warning sign is so serious, Jesus said. When the church becomes the world, it produces believers who are completely unprepared for my return. They expect a Jesus who validates their worldly Christianity, who rewards their religious activity, who approves of their comfortable faith. But they will meet a Jesus who calls them to die to the world, to be transformed rather than entertained, to measure success by my standards rather than by human metrics. Tomorrow night, Jesus said as the vision began to fade, I will show you what genuine Christianity looks like, in contrast to worldly Christianity, and how believers can escape the worldliness that has become so normalized they don't even recognize it anymore. As I found myself back in my bedroom, the weight of what I had witnessed pressed down on me with crushing force. The 5 ways the church had become the world: measuring success like businesses, marketing like corporations, worshiping like entertainment, leading like organizations, and defining success like the world, were not isolated problems. They were systemic issues that had transformed Christianity into something Jesus never intended. And it was happening right now, in this moment, across thousands of churches. The final warning sign wasn't a future event, it was the present reality of a church that had become so worldly it could no longer recognize its own worldliness. The question that tormented me was both urgent and personal. If the church has become the world in these 5 specific ways, and if this is the final warning sign before Christ's return, how can believers escape the worldliness that has become so normalized? And more importantly, how much time is left before the one who calls his church to be distinct from the world returns to find a church that has become indistinguishable from it? The 3rd night brought the revelation that could save millions from the judgment that awaits worldly Christianity. After witnessing the 5 specific ways the church had become the world, measuring success like businesses, marketing like corporations, worshiping like entertainment, leading like organizations, and defining success like the world, I spent the entire day in a state of desperate urgency. What Jesus would show me about escaping this worldliness would prove both more radical and more necessary than I had imagined. The day after the 2nd vision was unlike any I had experienced. Everywhere I looked, I saw the worldliness Jesus had exposed. Every Christian advertisement, every church announcement, every ministry promotion, it all revealed how deeply the world had penetrated the church, and the most disturbing aspect was that no one else seemed to see it. What Jesus had shown me as the final warning sign, everyone else saw as normal, effective, and even praiseworthy Christianity. At exactly 1:11 a.m., the same time as the previous night, my bedroom filled with that overwhelming presence. But this time, Jesus' expression carried something different, fierce determination mixed with urgent love, as if he was about to reveal the escape route from a burning building and time was running out. Tonight, he said, his voice carrying both divine authority and desperate compassion, I will show you how believers can escape the worldly Christianity that has become normalized in the church. But I warn you, this escape requires a complete rejection of everything the modern church has taught you to value. It requires choosing my way over the world's way, even when my way looks foolish, ineffective, and unsuccessful by human standards. The room dissolved, and I found myself observing believers across the world who had begun to recognize the worldliness in their churches and were making the radical choice to pursue genuine Christianity instead. What I witnessed was both painful and beautiful, a process of extraction from worldly Christianity that required leaving behind everything that felt safe, successful, and validated. The first step to escaping worldly Christianity, Jesus explained, is recognizing that what the church calls success, I often call failure. You must learn to measure effectiveness by my standards rather than by human metrics. I watched as a megachurch pastor I recognized made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. After years of building a church of thousands through entertainment-focused services and market-driven strategies, he encountered the truth about worldly Christianity. And instead of defending his methods or justifying his approach, he made a radical choice. He stood before his congregation on a Sunday morning and confessed, "I've built this church using the world's methods. I've measured success by the world's standards. I've given you entertainment instead of transformation, programs instead of discipleship, and a comfortable religion instead of a costly faith. And I've been wrong." The congregation sat in stunned silence as he continued, "Starting today, everything changes. We're going to stop measuring success by attendance and start measuring it by transformation. We're going to stop focusing on production values and start focusing on God's presence. We're going to stop being a religious business and start being a spiritual family. Watch what happens," Jesus said, and I observed the aftermath of this pastor's decision. Within weeks, attendance dropped by half. Many people left because they wanted entertainment, not transformation. The budget decreased significantly. Other pastors criticized him for being irresponsible. Denominational leaders questioned his judgment. But something else happened too. Those who remained began to experience genuine transformation. Without the distraction of entertainment and programs, they encountered God in ways they never had before. The church became smaller numerically but deeper spiritually. They stopped measuring success by worldly metrics and started experiencing success by divine standards. This is the first step to escaping worldly Christianity, Jesus explained. You must be willing to reject the world's definition of success, even when it costs you everything the church has taught you to value: numbers, growth, recognition, and validation. The second step required an even more radical rejection of worldly methods. The second step, Jesus continued, is abandoning the marketing mindset that has transformed the gospel into a product and believers into consumers. You must stop trying to make Christianity appealing and start proclaiming truth regardless of whether people find it attractive. I watched as a church made the decision to completely eliminate their marketing department, cancel their advertising campaigns, and remove all the demographic targeting and consumer research that had shaped their ministry. The leadership team gathered and made a declaration: "We're going to stop marketing the church and start being the church." Instead of crafting messages designed to appeal to specific demographics, they began to simply proclaim truth. Instead of creating promotional materials to attract crowds, they focused on making disciples who would naturally share their faith. Instead of competing with other churches for members, they pursued genuine community that would be attractive because of its authenticity rather than its marketing. "Observe what happens," Jesus said, and I watched as this church experienced a dramatic shift. Their attendance initially declined as consumers left to find churches that would cater to their preferences. But slowly, genuinely hungry people began to arrive, not because of marketing, but because they had heard about a community where real transformation was happening. "This is the second step to escaping worldly Christianity," Jesus explained. "You must be willing to abandon the marketing mindset that has turned the gospel into a product, even when it means losing the crowds who are only attracted by your promotional strategies." The third step, address the entertainment model that had replaced genuine worship. The third step, Jesus said, is rejecting the entertainment model of worship and creating space for genuine encounter with my presence, even when it's uncomfortable, unpredictable, and doesn't produce the emotional experiences people have come to expect. I watched as a worship team made a radical decision. They removed all the production elements that had been designed to create emotional experiences: the dramatic lighting, the fog machines, the carefully choreographed moments. They stopped rehearsing performances and started seeking God's presence. The first Sunday after this change was awkward. People didn't know what to do. without the familiar production elements. The worship felt raw, unpolished, and uncomfortable. Many people complained that it wasn't excellent anymore. Some left to find churches with better production values. But something else began to happen. Without the distraction of entertainment, people started to actually encounter God. The worship became less about performance and more about presence. People who had been spectators became participants. The focus shifted from creating an experience to creating space for God to move. This is the third step to escaping worldly Christianity, Jesus explained. You must be willing to abandon the entertainment model that has replaced genuine worship with professional performance, even when it means losing people who were only there for the show. The fourth step required rejecting the corporate leadership model that had replaced spiritual authority. The fourth step, Jesus continued, is abandoning the corporate leadership model and returning to spiritual leadership that operates by dependence on the Holy Spirit, rather than by management expertise and organizational strategy. I watched as a pastor made the decision to stop functioning like a CEO and start functioning like a shepherd. He removed the corporate organizational chart from his office wall. He stopped attending business leadership conferences and started spending that time in prayer. He quit implementing management strategies and started seeking the Spirit's leading. His staff was confused at first. How will we make decisions without strategic planning? They asked. How will we grow without implementing proven organizational strategies? We'll seek God's direction, the pastor replied. We'll depend on the Holy Spirit rather than on human wisdom. We'll measure success by obedience to God rather than by organizational efficiency. The transition was difficult. Things that had run smoothly through corporate management became messier when they depended on spiritual discernment. Decisions took longer because they required prayer rather than just analysis. Growth slowed because they were focused on depth rather than breadth. But the church began to experience something it had never known during its corporate phase, the manifest presence and power of God. Miracles began to happen. People were genuinely transformed. The church became less impressive organizationally, but more powerful spiritually. This is the fourth step to escaping worldly Christianity, Jesus explained. You must be willing to abandon corporate leadership models and return to spiritual leadership, even when it means things become less efficient and more dependent on God. The fifth step was the most radical of all. The fifth step, Jesus said, his voice taking on particular intensity, is rejecting the self-focused gospel that has transformed Christianity into a self-help religion and returning to the gospel that calls people to die to themselves so they can live for me. I watched as a popular preacher who had built his ministry on messages about personal fulfillment and achieving your dreams had an encounter with the truth. He realized he had been preaching a gospel that required no death to self, no taking up of the cross, no losing your life to find it. The next Sunday, he stood before his congregation and preached a message that was radically different from anything he had ever said before. I've been lying to you, he began. I've been telling you that Jesus wants to help you achieve your dreams. But the truth is that Jesus wants you to surrender your dreams for his purposes. I've been teaching you to seek personal fulfillment, but Jesus calls you to die to yourself. I've been promising you abundance, but Jesus promises you a cross. The response was immediate and dramatic. People walked out during the sermon. Angry emails flooded his inbox. Attendance plummeted. Financial giving decreased. Other pastors accused him of being too negative, too harsh, too extreme. But something else happened. Those who remained began to experience genuine transformation. They stopped seeking a Jesus who would serve their agendas and started surrendering to a Jesus who called them to his agenda. They stopped measuring success by personal fulfillment and started measuring it by obedience to God. This is the fifth step to escaping worldly Christianity, Jesus explained. You must be willing to reject the self-focused gospel and preach the true gospel that calls people to die to themselves, even when it costs you the crowds who only wanted a Jesus who would make their lives better. As Jesus revealed these 5 steps, rejecting worldly success metrics, abandoning marketing mindsets, eliminating entertainment models, replacing corporate leadership, and preaching the true gospel, I began to see believers across the world who were making these radical choices. They were leaving megachurches to pursue genuine community. They were abandoning successful ministries to seek authentic transformation. They were rejecting everything the modern church celebrated to pursue what Jesus actually honored. And they were being criticized, marginalized, and dismissed by the mainstream church. This is the cost of escaping worldly Christianity, Jesus said. Those who pursue genuine faith will be rejected by those who are comfortable with worldly faith. Those who seek my approval will lose human approval. Those who measure success by my standards will be considered failures by human standards. But here is the truth, he continued, his voice filling with both warning and hope. The final warning sign means time is running out. The church has become so worldly that judgment is near. Those who escape worldly Christianity now will be ready when I return. Those who remain comfortable in worldly Christianity will be shocked to discover that what they thought was effective ministry was actually rebellion against my ways. As the vision began to fade, and I found myself back in my bedroom, Jesus spoke one final time, his words burning themselves into my consciousness. Tell them that the final warning sign is happening right now. The church has become the world. Tell them that escaping this worldliness requires rejecting everything the modern church has taught them to value. Tell them that the 5 steps I've shown you will cost them everything by human standards, but will save them from the judgment that awaits worldly Christianity. And tell them, he concluded, his voice carrying the weight of eternity, that time is running out. The final warning sign means the end is near. Those who continue in worldly Christianity while using my name will face my judgment, but those who are willing to reject worldly methods, pursue genuine transformation, and measure success by my standards, rather than by human metrics, these will be ready when I return. As his presence faded, I was left with the most important decision of my life. Would I continue participating in worldly Christianity that looked successful by human standards? Or would I take the 5 radical steps Jesus had revealed, even though they would cost me everything the church had taught me to value? The choice was mine, and it's yours too. The final warning sign is happening right now.
Thank you so much for watching this message all the way to the end. We truly appreciate you being part of this community of faith. If this video encouraged, inspired, or challenged your heart in any way, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future messages. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, favorite Bible verse, or prayer request in the comments below. Our community enjoys encouraging one another and praying together. May the Lord bless you, strengthen your faith, and fill your heart with His peace until we meet again in the next video. God bless you.
The church has become the world in 5 specific ways, measuring success like businesses, marketing like corporations, worshiping like entertainment, leading like organizations, and defining success like the world. And escaping this worldliness requires 5 radical steps: rejecting worldly success metrics, abandoning marketing mindsets, eliminating entertainment models, replacing corporate leadership, and preaching the true gospel of death to self. These steps will cost you everything by human standards. You'll lose crowds, recognition, financial success, and the approval of those who are comfortable with worldly Christianity, but you'll gain what matters most. You'll be ready when Jesus returns to judge a church that has become indistinguishable from the world while claiming to serve Him. The final warning sign is not coming, it's here. The question is not whether you'll recognize it, but whether you'll escape it before it's too late. And that escape begins today, with the choice to reject worldly Christianity and pursue genuine faith regardless of the cost. Time is running out. The final warning sign means the end is near. The choice to escape worldly Christianity must be made now, while there's still time to be transformed from a worldly believer into a genuine disciple ready for Christ's return.